In the summer of 2024, 12 of the greatest minds in the history of video game development, design, and theory gathered in the woods of Southern Oregon to discuss the modern gaming industry and the emergence of artificial intelligence technology. This is a series of conversations between old friends, old men now, men who have shaped the gaming world as we know it today, and whose innovations will continue to influence how we play for generations to come. Episode 7. What can AI do for game designers?
That was a lot to me in social. I mean, you can't copyright a style. You can copyright a work, but I could say, I could paint something in the style of Monet, and it's an original work. Right?
And all of us have written generating aspects of our entertainment, and we own the copyright to that. And, we didn't necessarily, or it was never determined whether we owned the copyright of all of the generated material from our game.
Gordon?
But it's not that new.
Yeah. So one of the challenges here, so you're making the humanist argument about a lot of this. And, I think the challenge here is that what this technology is doing is it's reflecting us back to ourselves, and we're realizing we're just not that fucking complex as we thought that we are. There's a lot of deterministic shit going on in our lives that, well, the randomness is what changes it, right? But, how we're going to react is much more deterministic than you would want to ever believe, right? No, I'm a free spirit. I have self-determination. You are an organism that is potted by,
magicians have known this for literally 4,000 years. I mean, this is what magicians have practiced it, right?
So that's the first part of things. So and on the micro expressions, you're totally wrong. We're not. Some of that tech already exists. I don't think we're 2 to 5 years from perfect, from literally. It's all about doing the cars.
I mean, Clint Eastwood. Those of you who have seen it, there is a piece of video that's like Clint Eastwood mad, Clint Eastwood happy. It's the same piece of video.
Yeah.
Because in his career, his expression range was about that wide.
That's the other part of it,
right? But
well, the new audience care, Chris. Don't forget about, they're not necessarily even going to think like us. And by the way, just to add some horror fuel onto this conversation. I read last night that the Chinese are introducing stem cells into LLMs. Okay.
Wait a minute. Biological stem cells?
Correct.
What did they do? Pour the solution over the computer?
Above my pay grade, but I was reading about it just last night, and that was what are we doing here? It was a sort of conversation. So, but that's the kind of stuff that I'm reading every single day. In terms of, so my outlook is maybe slightly different.
Yeah. We're still stuck in language here. I think
we were using it as a metaphor.
Yeah, I think we need to kind of broaden our horizons here. We have a lot of legal issues that we sorted out. We have, ways to white room the data, get it to run on a small platform. But as a designer, I think about what design opportunities does this open up? And I think, it's much bigger than 3D graphics, much bigger than the internet. The design space this opens up to us is, inconceivable.
Yeah. Let's have a Sid break here. What do you think, Sid? Anything good here?
Fascinating. The things that kind of come to my mind, yes, there's a lot of power, but I know when I work with AI for games, it's not to make the best AI, it's to make the AI that creates the best experience for the player. So,
very good.
How much control do you really have over what the AI is generating? Can you include those kind of subtleties? It feels like the input that you give is fairly limited. It doesn't, how does that correspond to 1,000 lines of code? A prompt for an AI. I'm not sure if I'm getting to anything interesting, but aren't you just kind of at the mercy of what the AI gives you? That's my question.
Ooh, very, yeah.
I mentioned yesterday that one of the groups I'm working with was using one AI to generate and another one to sort of censor it for medical accuracy. I did mention that here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I've been talking to a lot of people about that. And it just, what you just said, Sid, makes me think that maybe a lot of what game designers of the future will do is have multiple AIs of different types all working together to, essentially, because I said, I know exactly what you mean. I'm reminded very much of Civ 1 and the trade routes being faked by the computer, and how it wasn't until I heard that you were doing that it was like, oh, of course, it was just a perfect way to save doing a whole bunch of unnecessary work that nobody ever notices. But those are things that, from what I've seen, maybe not right now, but certainly in the fairly near future, we'll be able to have an array of different, models that are kind of working together. And I doubt, particularly at first, that it will be 100% effective. But, again, as we talked about yesterday, games can, tolerate a little bit of sloppiness more than, a lot of other things. And I expect we will be, some of the ones to first figure out how to use these competing or cooperating LLMs to create a kind of hybrid LLM that only works when you have all these different rule sets.
Well, the real breakthrough will be when they come up with a Crawford LLM that keeps saying, it's not art.
I think one of the challenges that I'm interested to see solved, and I think to see it pretty soon, is taking user input that users are already used to doing in games and feeding it into the generative components. So when you define a character, we can kind of crudely say, well, you've got a character class. Okay, I'm going to change some of the encounters or change the probabilities that you'll get encounters that are more relevant to a bard or an alchemist. But now you can define your character in a more literate way. My character has self-doubt about this, or my character has this anxiety or this passion or this, and that can get fed into scenario generation or any other matters of stuff we generate. And I think you'll get very unique and surprising results coming out of that for each individual person, depending on the depth that you put into the creation system. That's the stuff where it's our players' input and their experiences driving ultimately what they're getting reflected back.
That's kind of the project I'm working on right now. I'm working on a project where a person puts memories from their life into the system, and beyond some number of memories, it starts building associations, psychological maps about your behavior. Maybe you're scared of this, you like that, you've never been here. It learns about you, and then we go from there. But it's all based upon the player's input.
My wife's a retired psychotherapist, so we end up talking about a lot of stuff along these lines, and just hits me if you told a model for one of these characters that this bard's father was a blacksmith and was really angry that he was going off and singing and not coming and doing blacksmith, and would beat him when he came home drunk, or some might be a cliche, but you just feed that to the model and see what it does. My intuition is that, just as we've said, it's kind of eerie how this shows how simple we all are. It would be really interesting to see if you end up reproducing some secondary or tertiary effects on people's personalities and their relationships just by kind of feeding in the kind of traumas and things that happen to kids in childhood. It may be the language models are all we need to actually reproduce a lot of that. And conversely then for therapists, figuring out, well, what can you do to the language model to cure that problem or to mediate it? And can you use that same technique on human beings? Maybe we end up with artificial patients that way.
Done?
Other people hit their hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You're a pretty good chess player once upon a time, if I remember right. Have you been following what's been going on in the chess world recently?
A little bit.
So those who are, it's
The cheating aspect, there's the...
there's two different things going on at one time that I think are a fascinating window into our future.
Right.
Because they are an example of the end user using this stuff in the context of gameplay to improve their experience or success.
Oh, yeah.
So there are two different branches in chess that are interesting today. One of them is training. Increasingly, people are training for tournaments for the specific player they're playing by using systems like this to create opponents that train them for that activity. So in other words, chess is extremely textually, it has a great text model. You can feed games in, and if you feed in the last 150 games from Grandmaster, you've got a pretty good model of where he's going to go, where his natural tendencies are, which means you spend your preparation on things that will actually happen
against that player
versus random stuff, which I thought Fisher used to do. So as a result, you're seeing players show up at large-scale tournaments you have never heard of that are beating grandmasters. And now there's the second aspect. Some of those grandmasters are convinced they're going to the bathroom and using their phone and cheating, which probably is also going on. But what I think is happening is both things are happening simultaneously, which is machines are now capable of playing tournament-grade chess on your phone in the bathroom to allow you to be competitive, to beat literally the world champion, which looks like it happened in at least one case. At the same time, they're also making young players, in particular young players, incredibly competitive, incredibly quick. And grandmasters are greatly disquieted by this because it has accelerated their learning curve. Basically, that is a business where you would go spend 10 years of your life before anybody would even take you seriously. And now they're having kids who literally, we didn't know who.
9-year-old beat Magnuson.
Yeah, we had the 15-year-old kid who won out 10 boards at a tournament. The guy was unranked clocking in.
Wow. Well, next it'll be poker. I'll be reading your tells and,
Yeah, absolutely. But my point is that what's interesting there is how players apply it. So number one is some of them went to, how do I become a better player? And someone went to, how do I cheat? And I think that we're going to see exactly that behavior replicated. That is obviously the Las Vegas behavior too.
well, I think 5 years from now, I can easily generate 5,000 playtesters across whatever demographics I want, give them my game, get feedback, this demographic really hates it, that one loves it, they really like the fighting part, these people like the building part, I will be able to very quickly, at very low expense, get very high quality playtesting feedback.
Dude, I agree with that.
Now we can just monetize them. We just
get them to play
AI generate the games, they play the game.
Seems like a mess.
Gordon, I really do believe testing is one of the places we will get them.
Testing is catastrophic.
Especially network capacity testing and that kind of stuff that we've had to in the past, kind of expert system that we never do.
Yeah, but not just load testing, actual.
I mean, lots of. I mean everything. But load testing is an example of something that is absolutely low hanging fruit.
Oh yeah.
Dramatically improved.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the humanist is, we are, we have a spark of the divine, right? We're unique. We have our own thing. I think we're going to find out potentially, right? The thing that's most scary about AI to me is that you find out that we are the horse that can count to 3. Right? That's what raises the outrage about this. This is what people's secret fear is, that, oh shit, we're actually a mechanism, not a unique part of nature.
Are we really that predictable?
Well,
Maybe our random number generator. That's what I've always thought.
This reminds me of the old joke about the professor who had given a course so many times that he finally would just bring in a tape recorder playing his standard lecture number 27 and just play it, and he didn't even need to be there. And a week later he came back and saw that the lecture hall was filled with tape recorders. Are we looking at the same thing here, where the game designers use all this AI to produce games, and then a short time later, the customers are all just using AI to produce artificial game designers who produce games for them?
Who's got a kid in school that's been through this yet?
So through what?
Papers in school right now.
Oh, yeah.
They have an entire. They basically had to, in the last 2 years, rebuild the educational marking process for papers because it was so.
The instructors, right? You're all talking about.
Chris, to your point about human emotion in the face and how subtle it is, and wherever long deep fakes come along that line, but it's gotten to the point where there's a whole, like, can we even spot them? They're that good. And now, like, the latest one I read was where, like, they're looking at the blood vessels moving under your face is the only way they can tell that it isn't a deep fake versus a real human being. And hit a year.
Yeah.
Right. So forget the nuance of emotion. They got to look at blood vessels now. And I don't know, like he said, in a year, maybe that doesn't work.
Well, like the example Chris gave, Planet of the Apes, you reading this guy's, well, this ape's facial expression, and maybe he got it wrong at the very end instead of, maybe I'm that bad too. It was more like, oh, he deserves to die, So even if it goes off a different track, you're going to make it fit. You're going to connect the dots, and then now it becomes your version of the story you just saw.
You'll superimpose your view on it.
Right.
The same way that the ambiguous sentence, we impose our view on the ambiguous
So maybe the AI is not going to do exactly what the Andy Serkis did, but it's still going to be something that will, have an emotional impact.
Well, this is a great group to ask this question. I couldn't figure out online. Larry Niven, in one of his science fiction novels, dropped a line about man is not a rational animal, man is a rationalizing animal. And I didn't get that at the time, but then later it's like, oh yeah, we rationalize everything. And then I tried to look it up to see whether there was something he came up with, and I just could not figure that out. Did anybody know? Sir, you've heard that? Oh, well, I was hoping between the overlap science fiction and thinking about pattern matching.
So like 3 years, probably.
It says for you. Hold on.
So it's the main thing. People I would people I want to. So I've always made the following joke, and it's again Las Vegas leftovers. But the only difference between a magician and a con man is intent. Yeah. And those are some of the most interesting people because con man and magician work on a whole collection of shortcuts that we don't even perceive. And so there's a part of me,
Exploit.
yeah,
Great exploit.
absolutely. And there's a part of me that kind of like, well, when these guys get a hold of this technology, now we're really going to see something.
Well, there's the radio ad now for California psychics. When you want certainty, go to
Okay, here's a challenge I will offer. Write a prompt along the lines of write a short story, 1,000 words long, involving a character who encounters a dangerous animal in the woods and blah, blah, blah. You give some specifications for the prompt. You feed the prompt into whatever AI system you want. Then you email the prompt to a professional novelist. And then you compare the two outputs. And the question is, will the professional's short story be noticeably, obviously superior to the computer's? I think the answer will be yes, but it would be interesting to do the experiment.
Can I submit that actually the right way to do that is the inverse, which is, so guys like Bradbury, wrote for science fiction, they were given editorial prompts all the time.
Yeah.
Almost all of the great stories that you think of as great science fiction short stories, some editor kind of asked for that at some level or another. Take one of those stories that you have that input from the editor prompt, and then put that into CPT and see how long it takes to get to Bradbury's output.
Ooh, but we don't have access to those editors.
Bradbury's archives have all kinds of that stuff.
Ah.
Of course, that Bradbury work already exists and it's been fit into that.
I think one of the more complicated ways of thinking about that question is that the listener is absolutely relevant to the evaluation.
Yeah.
If you hand it to a consumer of modern American, consumer fiction, which is to say not literature.
Yeah.
Well, they'll rate something much better that has a lower word choice, more common word usage, and more common tropes. Whereas if you hand it to a professor of literature, you're going to get a very different response. So we work mostly for the masses. And so the manner in which we perceive value is often more like, pop boilers, fiction, I think. And we strive to add elements of uniqueness and sophistication to our work, but we know if we overshoot it, we're going to limit our audience a great deal. So I think the odds are good that if you took the most successful novels of the past 5 years and generated, a novel from them, that would be really successful because it would nail whatever it was that made those novels successful. But would it be appealing to a professor of literature? Probably not. They'd see through it the same way they'd see through handwritten bad fiction.
That's a really good point.
And if you wanted your Ray Bradbury thing, what you do is train a model with all the fiction up to the point where before he wrote.
Yeah.
You can't just give him elbow and stuff.
Yeah. So because what you're trying to do is, what's the context that he wrote?
So, Chris, your starting question was about character creation, and all I could think of is, well, just feed in Gatsby. I mean, aren't you going to get as much Gatsby as you could ever get out of that system? That's the full existence of who Gatsby is in that book.
But to answer your question about the prompt, I agree with you. Yes, you'd be able to tell the difference for now.
You think eventually they'd get to...
I'm almost positive.
Well, you could feed the output through an AI and say, can you please modify this by, breaking up some of the regularity, try hard.
Not good enough, do it again.
I think your point here is compelling, that the computer is going to base its calculations on its database, which is mostly the hoi polloi stuff. Yes, I suppose you could say Hemingway, Shakespeare, in fact, Shakespeare, limit it to Shakespeare and see what it can do. But I don't know that it would ever be able to come up with, "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never have loved before." That just doesn't seem like something that could ever be produced by any AI system looking over the entirety of human literature. It's too deep.
If you told it, write this for a 24-year-old girl, or write this for a 60-year-old man,
yes,
I think it might be really close.
I've got both a comment on the Ray Bradbury thing and a suggestion. The comment, by pure coincidence, I was an acquaintance of Ray Bradbury. I went to school with his daughter, and so I was her sponsor in when she entered. So he would come by once in a while, and got to know him that much. One of the striking things about him in person is how shy and how withdrawn he was. He was not a walk into the room and fill the room people, like we've met in some cases.
Yeah.
He was a shy guy. I could tell, even though in those days it was okay for him to walk into his daughter's dorm, go up the stairs and go down the hallway. And we were co-ed by turns in the hallway, so you'd have a row of men, row of women down around the corner. And so he would walk by my door en route going down to his daughter's room. You could tell that there was this sense of shyness, even though he could stick his head in the door and say hello to me, which was probably 25% of our interaction. And you could just feel it. And it wasn't just, oh, I'm in a dorm and I'm kind of, I feel like I'm intruding. There was a whole layer that was deeper than that to him. And in other conversations I had with him, you could feel it. One of the interesting questions is to think about how does that, so just by pure chance, and this is, I think, the only well-known writer where I have any kind of insight like that, by coincidence, was him. The other suggestion I had is, Chris, if after we're wrapped up here, you sent a prompt to each of us here, we've got some pretty renowned creativity in this group, for something simple. And each of us wrote, maybe a 500-word response to that prompt of whatever that is. And we collected those, and then we could separately give that same prompt to some LLMs. It would be interesting to see what this diverse group of people wrote. And we'd have to make a rule that we are not going to look at an LLM before we wrote it, because then it ruins the experience. We have to do it as us. Each of us, the way that naturally comes to us in our writing style. That would just be a very interesting experiment.
Yeah.
Use the Sherpa model. Remember, so they'll what is it?
Okay, so to try to put like a positive on this part of it, I think in many ways, a lot of our jobs, we are curators. That's what we do. We've curated talent that worked for us. We curate art styles. We curate the game we want to choose. We make all sorts of nuanced calls about the text and the sentences and how that it's put together. And that's always moving, right? I mean, the calls I would make now are quite different than the ones I made 10 years ago. So I don't know whether this is what I'm hoping or what will be reality, is that, yeah, it's going to generate all that stuff, but there's still going to need people to be the curator of all this. So whether it's coming from a human being or from an AI, even though I see stuff on Midjourney, and we don't lift Midjourney and put it right in the game, but it's great for ideation. And so, but I will go through it and go, I love the way the light's coming through that window, and that just may be the only thing. And then I will have that conversation with my concept artists, and they're like, yeah, we like it too. And so I'm hoping that the ever-changing nuance of human interaction keeps the AI up toes a little bit, and then that's where we come in to help kind of curate all of this material that's going, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
Do you think future job listings will include calls for prompters?
Prompt engineers. They already do. Yeah.
They already are.
Jesus. We employ one full time.
Oh,
Yeah, they're prompt engineers.
yes. My LinkedIn, so, I'm a game designer. My LinkedIn recommendations have changed entirely to prompters.
Yeah, they call them AI whisperers. No, in fact, we have one full time. He's for the comedy club.
Let's give Sid. We haven't heard from Sid in a while. Any thoughts, Sid? We've got a lot here.
Yeah. Two quick thoughts. It's going back to the innkeeper that can say 500 different things. When I'm making a game, I'm trying to make every piece of information, everything you hear, everything you see, convey something significant about the game. And that kind of, that kind of is contrary. The fact that it can say 500 things is probably not going to be, significant to the game. So that kind of, as a game designer, I see that as an interesting tool, maybe like a 3D graphic or something, but not as a game changer. The other question I have kind of is like, is success, if AI really works, is all it has done kind of duplicate something we already, it sounds like a Bradbury novel, it sounds like Shakespeare, it sounds like Bach, we kind of have all those things already. At what point is it creating something beyond what we already have?
Oh, shiver me timbers, rock. The parrot.
So, now, it's a couple things. So, Rich hit the QA thing. So, digital twinning real people to do real things is a big thing. This is why Meta will probably win the whole thing, or Google won it sooner or later because they have all the data. But so what Brian's talking about, oh yeah, you still need a human to pick the right thing for the other humans. What if you have all the other humans? You don't need you, right? You just go, run it through the thing. Oh, which thing which thing works better? Okay, you're A-Bing, everything you do against a set of digital twins who are actually going in and playing your experience digitally. And telling you, oh, here's the output. Oh, well, what if I tweak this? Oh, the output's better.
That's the testing,
Yeah. Oh, wait, yeah, my monetization went up. Oh, but my acquisition went down. Okay, what do I want to do here?
Well,
right?
The next,
so in the end, we're all going to be, maybe the way we live in the future is we just rent our digital twins to do things for us all day long.
the next logical step there is almost exactly that, and that you're talking about going for a mass audience, but why not just all right, I'm going to create a movie,
1,000 best people.
Well, no, even just send it. It's like, oh, Gordon, I've got Gordon's information. I'm going to edit this movie and send you the version that is Gordon's one, or Gordon and his family have a different set together. What is the overlap so that all
the group of them watching it will enjoy it the most.
Like, what's the best version of Jurassic Park?
Right, we'll tone down the violence a touch because the kid will
Priest's hair falling out.
Yeah.
No, but that's what it's going to come down to.
Right.
In games, they're like the perfect medium where we can create individualized entertainment once we know enough about you, and that format is malleable enough, right? So I can give Rich, his favorite version of Jurassic Park, Gordon a different version of it. This will even happen. It'll impact music and film as well.
And the issue that raises, which I think could probably find ways to work itself out. I mentioned yesterday, I can't unsee Saving Private Ryan.
Good.
Emotionally, I would rather not have seen Act 3 of Saving Private Ryan. It was too uncomfortable. Obviously, to experience the experience of Saving Private Ryan, you have to have seen Act 3. At some point, there will be somebody who will at least experiment with the idea of the cavalry coming over the hill in different time and different order. Act 3 is perfectly fine, thank you very much. And it's sanitized for me, which both protects my delicate little heart and deprives me of the artistic expression of the work.
Yeah,
which I cannot intellectually reject because that is emotion. And the greatest thing I was ever taught by my mentor in school as a writer was people can dismiss ideas once you've given them an emotion. They do not have the voluntary choice to reject it.
Yeah, I mean, can we really imagine a version of Saving Private Ryan for, my wife, in which the Americans and the Germans dance together and sing, and that's the ending, or my version of Jurassic Park where the dinosaurs eat everybody, or is that really a desirable future?
Kind of Bollywood.
Well, unless the internet decides you need to have that experience of badness, and it's going to serve it to you anyway.
So I want to talk about that. I come from music more than any other place. My creative context is all of this, and what you do purposefully in music is you make people uncomfortable. You pick dissident or less harmonious harmonies to make people feel uncomfortable for the moment so that you can resolve that later and harvest that emotion. And you do that at the microsecond of amazement up. And so what I'm a little concerned about is we have to still figure out that maybe sometimes the goal is for the AI to make people uncomfortable in a very specific way. And it needs to be as much about that. I think we can still teach that as a QA functionality, but seeking customer satisfaction is unlikely to produce the best artistic results and certainly unlikely to get the best out of us. We occasionally purposefully make people uncomfortable in our games because it drives them. And so we're going to need to continue to figure out how to do that and not strip that away, or else we'll end up with that vehicle. I'm sorry.
I can I say one thing? Out of all the mediums out there, music, film, whatever, our medium is one we've already advocated as the most serial control.
It's true.
We can't control where the player decides to steer the game. I can turn The Sims into a tragedy, a comedy, whatever. That's up to the player. And so we actually are advocating quite a bit of our, creative control compared to almost any other medium.
Are LLMs hyper mechanized mediocrity by the strict definition of mediocrity?
They are, I think. So Sid, I'm going to call back to F-15. So because I picked that sucker apart as much as any game I've ever played, you made what I perceive to be unbelievably purposeful decisions to surprise my ass in their missions all the time. Meaning I'd get jumped, I would find something that wasn't supposed to be there, or frankly, the mission information was incorrect because the design was to be incorrect. How much time did you really spend on that kind of functionality? It seemed like you spent a ton. In Gunship, maybe you fail.
What I found is if you create the sandbox appropriately, that stuff emerges. It's less about trying to create specific things happening at specific times, behind the scenes magic. It's more about creating the sandbox that allows those things to happen, and then they will happen. And the quote about we rationalize things, that happens a ton. Something will happen that is really random, but you will feel that happened. You were trying to get me unfairly, or we've heard people say civilization is a fantastic explanation of our tax system. No, really, it's not. So people,
They fill in
plausible.
They fill in the
plausible.
parts. Yeah.
It's a plausible sandbox combined with what you add to it, and a lot of it is what you add to it.
I think emergence is a really key thing that we haven't talked about at all. And I think a lot of Civ games and others, basically they traffic in emergence, plus exploiting our brains, desire to connect the dots and make sense, in a story sense. I can tell you the story of what happened in civilization, and half of the explanation, cause and effect, actually it's not there. I imagine, because the game was built ambiguously enough. But at the same time, there was enough emergence to where there was a limited number of patterns that could have unfolded.
I've always taken, I used to take a rather negative view of the very concept of emergence, because for me, what that meant was, you didn't know what you were designing, and so it did things you didn't expect. Maybe you need to be a better designer. However, systems now have grown so complex, so powerful, that I can completely understand why things would happen that you didn't anticipate. They're just too big and complicated.
But Fargo War in Patton versus Rommel still had, this is a long time ago, that had emergent gameplay.
And I want to even go farther back, Eastern Front. One of the things, I don't think I've ever mentioned this to you, but one of the things that pissed me off, and I love that game, played the hell out of it, is that I got to the point where I got so good that I had pushed all my units to the far right edge of the map and destroyed, every Russian unit.
You were good.
But a little Chris Crawford was popping up saying, "You're making a terrible mistake. You're too far overextended. You're way too far to the and because something in the algorithm you had set up didn't account for the emergence of somebody being able to." I wrapped the 1-bit counter at 255 for my score.
That had to be Patton versus, the Bulge game then. Or no, Patton versus Rommel had the Chris Crawford popping up with advice.
It was accomplished.
But engineering for
There was some, whatever. It was definitely Eastern Front. There was something, or maybe I am conflating.
You guys do understand that that's all sports products are. They're completely emergent. It is models running. That is all.
And it's not a cop-out. Designing for emergence is not easy.
No, tuning it is a bitch.
Yeah. Well, Conway's life,
The sports games you start out, because you're modeling systems,
right,
especially with baseball, you have all the...
You don't know what the players are going to do.
Yeah, and the player's context is really spectacular. In the sense of timing, they add tremendous value that I can't even make show up on the screen.
Conway's life, that rule set was like finding a needle in a haystack.
Yep.
Out of all the possible rules he could have put in to get life out of that. So emergence is not a cop-out at all.
And Will, you've talked about the distinction between toys versus games, and I think that's crucial to maybe how you are seeing what art is. And there is an art to making toys, just as there is an art to writing a story or giving a speech. And a toy is pure emergence. And what we're creating is neither. We're creating somewhere in between that. So I know you don't necessarily play all these games, but in Breath of the Wild, my emergent gameplay was mountain climbing. That's all I wanted to do. It was rendered so beautifully, and I liked doing that so much, and I liked just jumping off the top of mountains, that for me, my entertainment at a certain phase of playing that game was entirely what was emergent to me. But there was a narrative, there was a very clear game design. So the richer games are incorporating toy-like experience or emergent, whatever you want to call it, with kind of linear narrative. And I think it's going to be kind of hard to impose a strictly linear narrative evaluation of those experiences because the person playing it is such a part of it.
Stay tuned for episode 8, where we discuss copyright issues and how AI is impacting the world of art and creativity.